The morning sun cast long shadows across the Double B Ranch as Thomas Brennan stood at the fence line, watching the horizon where the grassland met the endless Wyoming sky. The year was 1887, and the ranch stretched for miles in every direction, a kingdom of cattle and horses carved from the wild frontier by his father's iron will. The sound of hoofbeats broke his reverie. A rider approached from the main house, dust swirling in his wake. Thomas recognized old Jake, who'd been with the ranch since before he was born. "Your father wants you," Jake said, reining in his mount. "Says it's urgent." Thomas nodded, knowing that when Marcus Brennan summoned, "You came," he'd learned that lesson early and well. He mounted his own horse, a chestnut gelding named Copper, and headed toward the sprawling ranch house that dominated the valley like a fortress. The Double B wasn't just a ranch. It was an empire. 20,000 head of cattle, 500 horses, and enough land to ride for days without reaching the boundary. Marcus Brennan had built it from nothing, arriving in Wyoming territory 30 years ago with little more than determination and a keen eye for opportunity. Now, at 62, he ruled it all with the same unbending authority he'd used to tame the land itself. Thomas found his father in the study, a room lined with ledgers and maps, the walls adorned with the heads of elk and buffalo. Marcus stood behind his massive oak desk, his weathered face set in its usual stern expression. In his hand was a letter, the paper crisp and official-looking. "Sit," Marcus commanded, and Thomas obeyed, settling into the leather chair across from his father. "Do you know what this is?" Marcus held up the letter. "No, sir. It's from Judge Thornton in Cheyenne. The railroad's coming through, and with it, changes, big changes." Marcus set the letter down carefully. "The old agreements, the handshake deals that built this territory, they're not enough anymore. We need legal protection, political allies, connections that run deeper than friendship." Thomas waited, knowing his father would come to the point in his own time. Marcus Brennan never rushed anything except cattle to market. "You're 28 years old," his father continued. "Past time you took a wife. I've been patient, letting you sow your wild oats, but patience has its limits." "Father, You'll listen." The words cracked like a whip. "I've made arrangements. 5 families, all with daughters of marriageable age, all with something we need. The Harrisons have railroad connections. The Prescotts own the largest bank in Denver. The Whitmans control water rights along the Platte. The Carmichaels have political influence in Washington. The Sterlings own the biggest mercantile operation between here and San Francisco." Thomas felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You've invited them here? They'll arrive within the week. You'll choose one of the girls, court her properly, and be married by Christmas." Marcus's gray eyes, the same shade as Thomas's own, bore into his son. "This isn't a request. What if I refuse?" Marcus's laugh was humorless. "Then you can leave, start your own spread somewhere, see how far you get without the Brennan name or money, but you won't inherit so much as a fence post from the Double B." The ultimatum hung in the air between them like gun smoke. Thomas had always known this day would come, but he'd hoped. What? That his father would change? That the old man would suddenly value happiness over holdings? "I need time to think," Thomas said finally. "You have until they arrive. 1 week." Marcus turned to the window, looking out over his domain. "This ranch is bigger than both of us. Son, it's a legacy. Your grandfather would have understood. Hell, he'd have had you married off at 18. Thomas rose to leave, but his father's voice stopped him at the door. "Don't think I don't know where your mind wanders," Marcus said quietly. "That stable girl, Clara." Thomas's hand tightened on the doorknob, but he didn't turn around. "She's a good worker. I'll grant you that. Best hand with horses we've ever had. But she's not wife material for a Brennan. She's got no family, no connections, no dowry, nothing but the clothes on her back and a gift with animals." "She has more than that," Thomas said, his voice low. "Does she? What?" "A pretty face, a kind heart." Marcus turned from the window. "You can't build a future on sentiment, boy. This land doesn't care about your feelings. The banks don't accept love as collateral." Thomas left without another word, his boots echoing on the hardwood floors as he strode through the house and out into the harsh brightness of the afternoon sun. He didn't head back to the range where he'd been checking fence lines. Instead, his feet carried him toward the stables, drawn by a force stronger than his father's will. The stable complex was Marcus Brennan's pride, larger and finer than many ranch houses, with stalls for 50 horses and quarters for the hands who worked them. Thomas could hear activity inside, the soft nickering of horses, the clink of metal on metal. Someone humming a melody he couldn't quite place. He found her in the third stall, working with a young mare that had been giving everyone else trouble. Clara Morrison moved with the fluid grace of someone born to work with horses, her movements calm and deliberate. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, wisps escaping to frame her face. Her dress was plain brown calico, patched in places and dusty from the morning's work, but she wore it with more dignity than any ball gown. She looked up as his shadow fell across the stall entrance, and for a moment, neither spoke. Her eyes, brown as rich earth after rain, met his, and in them, he saw she already knew. "Miss Clara," he said, using the formal address even though they'd known each other for 6 years. Ever since she'd arrived at the ranch as a 16-year-old orphan with nothing but a letter of recommendation from a mission school. "Mr. Thomas," she replied, equally formal, though her voice carried warmth that the words didn't. She turned back to the mare, running her hands along the animal's neck. "Your father sent for you this morning." It wasn't a question. News traveled fast on a ranch, carried on the wind like seeds. He did. Important business, I imagine. Her hands never stopped their gentle work, but he saw the tension in her shoulders. "You could say that." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When do they arrive? The brides?" He wasn't surprised she knew. Clara had a way of understanding things without being told, reading the ranch's moods like she read the horses. "A week." She nodded, her face carefully neutral. "That's good. The ranch needs strong alliances. Your father's a smart man." "Clara, you should go," she said, still not looking at him. "It wouldn't do for you to be seen here, not now. People might talk." Let them talk. Now she did turn, and the look in her eyes made his chest tight. "You can say that because you're Marcus Brennan's son. I'm just the orphan who tends the horses. We live in different worlds. Thomas, we always have. That doesn't mean—" "Yes," she said firmly. "It does." She moved past him, out of the stall, and he caught her scent, hay and horse and something uniquely her, like wildflowers after rain. For a moment, he wanted to reach out, to stop her, to say all the things that had been building in him for years. But she was right. She was always right. "I haven't chosen anyone yet," he said to her, retreating back. She paused at the stable door, silhouetted against the bright afternoon. "You will," she said softly. "You have to. The Double B needs you to." Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the horses and the weight of inheritance pressing down on his shoulders like a yoke. Outside, the wind picked up, sending dust devils dancing across the yard, and Thomas wondered if a man could drown in dust the same way he could in water. He stayed in the stable for a long time, thinking about duty and desire, about the price of land and the cost of love, when he finally emerged. The sun was sliding toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, beautiful and harsh, like everything in this country, like everything worth having. The dawn came early to the Double B, painting the sky in shades of pearl and copper. Clara Morrison had been awake for an hour already, moving through her morning routine with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned young that hard work was the only currency that never lost its value. The stable was her domain, her sanctuary here, among the warm bodies of horses and the sweet smell of hay. She could forget, if only for a while, that she was nobody from nowhere, a girl whose parents existed only in the fading memory of a worn photograph she kept hidden beneath her pillow. She worked methodically, mucking out stalls, filling water troughs, checking each horse for cuts or swelling. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, moved with a gentle precision. The horses knew her. trusted her, to them. She wasn't the orphan stable girl. She was the one who brought oats and comfort, who whispered away their fears during thunderstorms. "Morning, Dancer," she murmured to a bay mare, running her hand along the animal's neck. "How's that leg today?" The mare nickered softly, leaning into Clara's touch. 3 weeks ago, Dancer had come up lame, and everyone except Clara had written her off. But Clara had spent hours each day, massaging the injured leg, applying poultices, walking the mare slowly around the paddock. Now, Dancer was nearly sound again. "That's my girl," Clara said, offering the horse a handful of grain. "We'll have you running again soon. You always did have a way with the difficult ones." Clara's heart jumped, but she kept her movement steady, not turning toward Thomas's voice. She'd heard him come in, she always heard him, but had hoped he'd pass by without stopping. After yesterday's conversation, she needed distance, time to shore up the walls around her heart. "They just need someone to listen," she said, focusing on Dancer. "Most creatures do." Thomas moved closer, and she could feel his presence like heat from a fire. He was dressed for work, his clothes practical rather than fancy. Denim pants, a blue cotton shirt, leather chaps. When he worked alongside the men, you could almost forget he was the owner's son. Almost. "Clara, about yesterday?" "There's nothing to discuss." She moved to the next stall, he following like a shadow. "You have your duty. I have mine. It doesn't have to be that way." Now she did turn, fixing him with a look that had taken years to perfect. Calm, distant, professional. "Doesn't it? Tell me, Thomas, what exactly do you think would happen if you refused your father? If you chose someone like me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, and in that silence lay all the answers she needed. "I thought so." She resumed her work, spreading fresh straw in the empty stall. "We both know how this story ends. You'll marry one of those girls, run the ranch, have sons to carry on the Brennan name, and I'll still be here, tending the horses, grateful for a roof over my head and honest work. You make it sound so simple. Because it is simple, just not easy." She paused, gripping the pitchfork handle. "Do you remember when I first came here?" "Of course. You were 16, skinny as a fence rail, wearing a dress 2 sizes too big. I was terrified," she admitted. "The mission school prepared me for service work, taught me to read and write and figure. But they couldn't prepare me for this." She gestured at the vast stable, the ranch beyond, for how big the world was outside those walls. She moved to the feed bins, Thomas still following. "Your father could have sent me to work in the house, or with the chickens, or any number of easy jobs. But Jake brought me here, to the horses, said they needed someone with patience. And you proved him right. Best decision Jake ever made. Your father agreed to it. He took a chance on a nobody orphan girl." Clara measured out oats, her movements precise. "I owe him everything. This place, this work. It saved me, gave me purpose." "You don't owe him your whole life." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't I? Where would I go? Thomas, what would I do? I have no family, no connections, no money saved beyond a few dollars. The mission school is gone now, burned down 2 winters past. This ranch is my world." Thomas caught her arm as she passed, gentle but insistent. "You're more than just a stable hand. Clara, you know that." For a moment, she let herself feel the warmth of his touch, the calluses on his palm that proved he wasn't just a pampered rancher's son. Then she pulled away. "To you, maybe, but not to the world, not to your father, not to the banks and lawyers and railroad men." She met his gray eyes, so like his father's but holding a warmth Marcus Brennan's never showed. "I learned long ago to be grateful for what I have, not to dream of what I can't." A shout from outside broke the moment. Through the stable doors, they could see riders approaching, Jake and several hands, driving a group of horses in from the far pasture. "New stock," Clara said, professional mask sliding back into place. "I should prepare the empty stalls." She moved away, but Thomas's voice followed her. Do you ever think about that first week, when you were learning your way around? Clara's hand stilled on the stall latch. She did remember how Thomas had found her crying behind the grain shed on her third day, overwhelmed and homesick for a home that had never really existed. How he'd sat with her, not saying much, just being there until the tears stopped. "That was a long time ago," she said softly. 6 years. Not so long. Long enough. She opened the stall door. "You should go. The men will wonder why you're here. I'm checking on Dancer. Everyone knows I have an interest in her recovery." "Everyone knows a lot of things," Clara said carefully. That's the trouble. The sound of horses grew closer, and soon the stable was full of movement and noise. Jake supervised as the hands brought in the new animals, a mix of young stock and a few older horses bought from a ranch going under up north. Clara moved among them with practiced ease, assessing each animal, already planning their care. Thomas stayed, ostensibly helping but really watching her work. She had a gift, no denying it. The most skittish colt calmed under her touch. An old mare that had been biting at the handlers settled immediately when Clara approached. "How do you do that?" asked Sam, one of the younger hands, after Clara had soothed a particularly fractious stallion. "I listen," she said simply. "They tell you what they need if you pay attention." As the morning wore on, Thomas found excuses to linger. He helped move feed, checked tack, even picked up a brush to work on one of the horses. The other hands exchanged glances but said nothing. They all knew about the boss's son and the stable girl, the careful dance they'd been doing for years. "Heard tell we're getting visitors soon," Jake mentioned casually as they worked. 5 families from back east and Denver way. "News travels," Thomas said, his voice carefully neutral. Always does on a ranch. Jake spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Your pa's a smart man. Alliances matter out here." Clara said nothing, but Thomas saw her shoulders tighten. "Course," Jake continued. "There's different kinds of strength. Money's one, political connections another, but sometimes what a ranch needs most is someone who understands the land, the animals, the work itself." If Jake was trying to make a point, he didn't belabor it. He moved off to supervise the hands, leaving Thomas and Clara working side by side in silence. The sun climbed higher, and the stable grew warm. Clara pushed a strand of hair back from her face, leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Without thinking, Thomas reached out to wipe it away. She froze at his touch, and for a moment they stood suspended, his thumb against her cheek, her brown eyes wide. Then voices approached, Marcus Brennan's distinctive baritone among them, and they sprang apart. Marcus entered the stable with 2 men Thomas recognized as cattle buyers from Cheyenne. His eyes took in the scene, his son, the stable girl, the carefully proper distance between them that hadn't been there seconds before. "Thomas, good. You're here. These gentlemen want to discuss the fall drive." "Of course, Father," Thomas nodded to Clara. "Miss Morrison, thank you for the update on Dancer." "Sir," she said quietly, dropping a small curtsy that looked strange in her work clothes. As Thomas left with his father and the buyers, he heard Marcus say, "That girl does fine work. Best investment we've made in the horse operation." Investment. That's what they all were to Marcus Brennan. Investments that either paid dividends or didn't. Thomas wondered what dividend his father expected from selling his son to the highest bidder. The rest of the day passed in a blur of business, discussing cattle prices, planning the fall roundup, reviewing contracts. But Thomas's mind kept drifting to the stable, to a pair of brown eyes and work-worn hands that gentled the wildest horses. That evening, as the sun painted the mountains crimson, he saw her again. She was in the small paddock behind the stable, working with a young filly. The horse was learning to accept a saddle, and Clara moved with infinite patience, letting the animal set the pace. Thomas watched from the shadow of the barn, not wanting to disturb the lesson. In the golden light, with her hair coming loose from its braid and her face soft with concentration, Clara was beautiful. Not the polished beauty of the women his father wanted him to marry, but something deeper, truer. She must have sensed his presence because she looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. For a heartbeat, her careful mask slipped, and he saw everything. The longing, the resignation, the strength it took to stand there and not reach out. Then she turned back to the filly, and the moment passed. But Thomas carried it with him as he walked back to the big house, where 5 rooms were being prepared for 5 prospective brides. A week, his father had said, 7 days to choose a future that would satisfy everyone except the 2 people whose hearts were already spoken for. The wind picked up as darkness fell, carrying the scent of sage and the distant howl of a coyote. Thomas stood on the porch of the big house, looking out over the empire his father had built, and wondered if any amount of land was worth a lifetime of regret. The study was thick with cigar smoke and the weight of unspoken words. Marcus Brennan stood behind his desk like a general planning a campaign, while Thomas sat across from him, his back straight despite the exhaustion of a long day working the range. "The Prescott girl arrives first," Marcus said, consulting a ledger. "Day after tomorrow. The others follow throughout the week. I've arranged activities. Rides, picnics, a dance on Saturday. You'll have ample opportunity to assess each one, like horses at auction," Thomas muttered. Marcus's eyes sharpened. "Exactly like that. You evaluate bloodlines, conformation, temperament. A wife should be chosen with no less care. Is that how you chose mother?" The question hung between them like a blade. Marcus set down his pen slowly, his weathered face unreadable. "Your mother," he said finally, "was the daughter of Samuel Hayes, who owned the water rights to Crystal Creek. Without that water, the Double B would have stayed a 2-bit operation running maybe 500 head. Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest. "So you married her for water?" "I married her because it was necessary." Marcus moved to the window, his broad shoulders blocking the lamplight. Catherine was 17, pretty enough, well-educated back east. Her father was going bankrupt, about to lose everything to creditors. I offered a solution, marriage to his daughter, and I'd pay his debts, ensure he kept his home. "You bought her." Marcus turned, his face hard. "I saved her family from ruin. She got a home, security, a position in society. That's how marriages work out here. Son, not some fairy tale romance, but practical arrangements between families." "Did she love you?" A muscle worked in Marcus's jaw. "Love? She barely knew me when we wed, but we built something together. Respect came first, then understanding. By the time you were born, yes, I believe there was love. Real love, built on shared struggles and victories." "And if she'd loved someone else, before you?" "Then she was smart enough to forget him." Marcus returned to his desk. "Just as you'll forget whatever foolish notions you've entertained about that stable girl." Thomas's hands clenched. "Her name is Clara." "I know her name. I know she came here with nothing but a missionary's recommendation and the clothes on her back. I know she's worked hard, earned her keep, but that doesn't make her suitable." "Suitable for what? To bear the Brennan name? To host dinner parties? To smile while you auction off our lives to the highest bidder?" Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "To secure our future. You think this ranch runs on sentiment? Every year, smaller operations go under. Drought, disease, market crashes. They don't care about your feelings. But with the right connections, the right alliances, we weather any storm. We have 20,000 head of cattle, half a county of land. How much more do you need?" "It's not about what I need." Marcus's voice dropped. "It's about what survives. Your grandfather started with 160 acres and a dream. I built it into an empire. Your job is to ensure it lasts another generation." Thomas stood abruptly. "Maybe I don't want that job." "Then you're a fool." Marcus pulled out a map, spreading it across the desk. "Look at this. Really look. See these marks? Everyone is a ranch that's failed in the last 5 years. The Hendersons, the Millers, the Youngbloods, all gone. You know why? Bad luck? Bad planning. Henderson refused to ally with the railroad. They built around him, cut off his access to markets. Miller wouldn't work with the banks, couldn't get credit when drought hit. Youngblood thought he could go it alone. The cattle barons squeezed him out. Marcus traced the boundaries of the double B with one thick finger. We survive because we're strong, but strength isn't just in cattle or land. It's in connections, alliances, marriages that bind families together. Like medieval kingdoms, Thomas said bitterly. Exactly like that, and kingdoms that forget to secure their borders fall. Thomas moved to the door, then paused. What if I told you I was already in love? I'd tell you to grow up. Love is a luxury for people who don't carry the weight of legacy. Mother loved you. You just said so. She learned to love me, after we were married, after she understood what we were building together. Marcus's voice softened slightly. Your mother was a practical woman. She knew that security and respect were solid foundations for a marriage. Love can grow from those things. And if it doesn't, then you have security and respect, which is more than most have. Marcus returned to his ledgers. The Harrison girl is accomplished, speaks 3 languages, plays piano. Her father owns substantial railroad stock. I don't care if she speaks 10 languages. The Prescott girl is said to be beautiful, and their banking connections would ensure we never lack for capital. Father, the Whitman girl rides well. I'm told, might actually be help during roundup instead of merely ornamental. Stop. Marcus looked up. The Carmichael girl's uncle is a senator. Imagine having that kind of influence when the government's deciding grazing rights. I said stop. Silence fell between them, heavy as mountain snow. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was quiet but implacable. 1 week, Thomas. You'll meet them all, treat them with courtesy, and choose. Or you'll pack your things and leave with whatever fits in your saddlebags. No money, no horses except the one you ride, no claim to ever return. You disinherit your only son? I'd cut off a gangrened limb to save the body. This ranch is bigger than either of us. Marcus's gray eyes were like winter ice. Your mother gave me 1 son. 1. Everything I've built, everything your grandfather started, it all rests on you. I won't watch you throw it away for a pretty face and a warm smile. Clara is more than that. Is she? What can she offer besides devotion? Can she host a governor's wife, negotiate with railroad executives, charm senators into favorable legislation? Marcus shook his head. She's a fine girl, I grant you, but the double B needs a queen, not a stable hand. Thomas felt anger rise like bile. You don't know her, her intelligence, her strength. I know exactly what she is. An orphan who's made the best of her circumstances. Admirable, but not enough. Marcus pulled out another paper. I've made a list of each family's assets, what they bring to an alliance. Study it. Make your choice wisely. And if I choose none of them, then choose your horse carefully. It's a long ride to nowhere. Thomas took the paper, his hand steady despite the turmoil inside. Is this what you felt when grandfather arranged your marriage? This trapped feeling? For just a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Memory, perhaps, or long-buried pain. Then it was gone. I felt grateful. My father was giving me the tools to build something lasting, just as I'm giving you. He turned back to the window. Your mother's grave is out there, on the hill overlooking the valley. I visit sometimes, tell her about the ranch, about you. I think she'd understand what I'm doing. She always understood necessity. Would she, or would she remember being 17 and forced to marry a stranger? She'd remember the life we built, the son we'd raised, the empire we created from dust and determination. Marcus's reflection stared back from the dark window. Every choice has a price. Thomas, the question is whether you're willing to pay it. Thomas left without another word. The list of prospective brides crumpled in his fist. Outside, the night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled silver. He could hear the horses in the stable, the distant bawling of cattle, the whisper of wind through grass, all the sounds of the empire he was expected to inherit on impulse. He walked to the small cemetery on the hill. His mother's headstone stood white in the moonlight. Catherine Hayes Brennan, beloved wife and mother. 1,843 to 1,882 inches. She died 5 years ago of pneumonia. A fierce woman laid low by something as common as a winter chill. Did you love him, Mother? Thomas asked the stone. Or did you just learn to live with the choice that was made for you? The wind gave no answers. But as he stood there, Thomas remembered his parents together, the way his father's harsh face would soften when Catherine entered a room, how she could calm his rages with a touch. Perhaps it had started as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way, it had become real. Or perhaps that's just what they'd told themselves to make the cage bearable. Thomas made his way back down the hill, past the big house with its windows glowing yellow, toward the stables where he knew a light still burned. Clara would be there, checking on the horses one last time before bed. She always was, as constant as the sunrise. He didn't go in, just stood in the shadows, watching her move between the stalls, her voice soft as she bid each animal good night. This was what his father couldn't see, not just her beauty or her kindness, but her dedication, the way she gave herself completely to her work, to this place. Tomorrow, the parade of suitable brides would begin. He would smile and be charming and evaluate them like bloodstock, just as his father demanded. But tonight, in the darkness between duty and desire, he allowed himself to imagine a different future, one where love mattered more than land, where a stable girl could become a rancher's wife without the sky falling. A foolish dream, perhaps, but for one more night, it was his to cherish. The first carriage arrived just after noon, dust billowing behind it like a declaration of change. Thomas stood on the porch of the main house, dressed in his best suit, a concession to his father who watched from the study window like a general overseeing battle preparations. Margaret Prescott emerged first, assisted by the driver, her traveling dress immaculate despite the long journey from Denver. She was everything Marcus had promised, beautiful in that polished way of city women, with golden hair arranged in perfect curls and eyes the color of spring sky. Her smile, when she saw Thomas, was practiced and bright. "Mr. Brennan," she said, dropping a graceful curtsy. "How wonderful to finally meet you. Father has spoken so highly of your family's operation." "Miss Prescott." Thomas bowed slightly, falling into the expected role. "Welcome to the Double B." "I trust your journey wasn't too taxing." "Oh, the landscape is so expansive," she said, glancing around with barely concealed apprehension at the endless grassland. "Rather different from Denver." Her father, William Prescott, emerged next, a portly man with shrewd eyes and soft hands that had never held anything rougher than a pen. Marcus appeared to greet them, all calculated warmth and Western hospitality. Within an hour, the second carriage arrived bearing Elizabeth Harrison and her mother. Elizabeth was petite, dark-haired, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Her mother, however, surveyed the ranch with calculating eyes, already measuring its worth. By evening, all 5 families had arrived, transforming the usually quiet ranch house into something resembling a society gathering. The dining room, rarely used since Catherine Brennan's death, blazed with light from the chandelier Marcus had imported from San Francisco years ago. Thomas found himself seated at the head of the table opposite his father, flanked by Margaret Prescott and Sarah Whitman. The arrangement was deliberate. He knew, Marcus leaving nothing to chance. "Your cattle operation is quite impressive," said James Carmichael, Patricia's father, a thin man with political ambitions written in every gesture. "I understand you run 20,000 head?" "Closer to 22,000 now," Marcus replied, carving the roast with precise strokes. "We'll drive 8,000 to market this fall." "Fascinating," murmured Patricia Carmichael, though her eyes suggested she found cattle anything but. She was handsome rather than beautiful, with sharp features and sharper wit. "Do you enjoy the cattle business, Mr. Brennan?" she asked Thomas. "It's in my blood." Thomas replied, which was true enough, "Though I confess I prefer the horse operation." "Oh, yes," Margaret interjected, eager to show knowledge. "Father mentioned you have quite a notable breeding program." "We do. Some of the finest quarter horses in the territory. Thomas caught himself glancing toward the window, toward the stables where Clara would be eating her simple supper with the hands. "I'd love to see them," said Sarah Whitman, speaking for the first time. Of all the girls, she seemed most at ease, her riding clothes practical rather than fashionable. "I brought my own mount, but I'm always interested in good horse flesh." "I'd be happy to arrange a tour tomorrow," Thomas offered, grateful for the neutral topic. Jennifer Sterling, the merchant's daughter, leaned forward. "Do you have many servants? The house seems quite large for frontier living. We manage with a small staff." Marcus answered, "Efficiency is key to any successful operation." The conversation flowed on. Talk of railroad expansion, beef prices, the possibility of statehood for Wyoming territory. Thomas contributed when necessary, but found his attention wandering. Through the doorway, he could see servants moving back and forth. And once, just once, he caught a glimpse of Clara carrying fresh linens upstairs. She'd been pressed into house service for the occasion, he realized, pulled from her beloved stables to help accommodate their guests. Their eyes met for just an instant before she disappeared. But in that moment, he saw everything, the careful blankness she wore like armor, the slight shadows under her eyes, the determined set of her shoulders. "Don't you think so, Mr. Brennan?" Thomas jerked back to the conversation, finding Margaret Prescott watching him expectantly. "I apologize. My mind wandered. The demands of the ranch, you understand?" She tittered, a sound like crystal breaking. "I was saying that Denver has become quite cosmopolitan. We have an opera house now. You know, do you enjoy opera?" "I can't say I've had much opportunity," Thomas admitted. "Culture comes slowly to the frontier." "But surely that will change," Elizabeth Harrison ventured. "With the railroad expanding, civilization must follow." "Civilization," Marcus said, his voice carrying a warning that only Thomas recognized, "takes many forms. Miss Harrison, what matters is strength, economic, political, social." After dinner, the ladies retired to the parlor while the men lingered over brandy and cigars. Thomas endured 30 minutes of discussion about interest rates and political appointments before excusing himself, claiming the need to check on a sick horse. The night air was a relief after the close atmosphere of the dining room. He walked slowly toward the stables, letting the familiar scents of sage and horse wash away the perfume and pomade. A figure moved in the shadows by the corral, and he recognized Clara's silhouette against the moonlit rails. "Shouldn't you be serving coffee to our distinguished guests?" he asked softly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't turn. "Mrs. Rodriguez said I was more trouble than help. Apparently, I don't pour tea with sufficient grace." "Clara, they're beautiful," she interrupted. "All of them. Accomplished, refined. Everything a rancher's wife should be. They're strangers. So was your mother when she married your father." She finally faced him, and even in the darkness, he could see the forced calm in her expression. "Miss Whitman seems nice. She actually knows horses." Don't what? Speak the truth? She'd be a good choice. Thomas, her family's land borders yours to the north. The merger would create the largest ranch in the territory." "Stop it. Miss Prescott is stunning. Imagine the sons she'd give you, golden-haired boys to carry on the Brennan name. Clara, please. Or perhaps Miss Carmichael. Her uncle's influence could—" He kissed her. It wasn't planned or proper or wise, but he couldn't bear another word about suitable wives when the only woman he wanted stood before him, breaking her own heart to save his inheritance. For a moment, she was frozen. Then her hands came up to his chest, though whether to push him away or pull him closer, even she didn't seem to know. The kiss was desperate, flavored with impossibility and longing too long denied. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Clara's carefully constructed composure had cracked, revealing the pain beneath. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that now? When—" "Because I'm a fool," he said roughly. "Because watching you serve them, seeing you pushed aside for—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair.
I'm sorry, I had no right.
No, she agreed, stepping back. You didn't. A burst of laughter from the house made them both turn. Through the windows, they could see the gathering in the parlor, Marcus holding court. The young ladies arranged like flowers, their parents hovering with watchful eyes. Your future is in there, Clara said quietly. 5 different versions of it, each more suitable than the last. What if I don't want suitable? Then you're selfish as well as foolish. Her voice was steady again. The moment of weakness passed. Do you think you're the only one who's ever had to choose between love and duty? At least you have a choice. Those girls in there, do you think they want to marry a stranger? They're doing what their families require, just as you must. And you? What do you choose? I choose to be grateful for what I have. A job, a home, a purpose. She moved toward the stable. I choose to remember my place. Your place is in the stable, Mr. Brennan, nowhere else. She paused at the door. The bay mare in stall 4 is colicking. That's why I'm out here. Someone should walk her. It was a dismissal, polite but firm. Thomas watched her disappear into the stable, then turned back to the house where his future waited in 5 different shades of propriety. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. He danced with each young lady in turn, made appropriate conversation, smiled at the right moments. Margaret Prescott played piano beautifully. Elizabeth Harrison sang in a sweet, tentative voice. Sarah Whitman spoke knowledgeably about bloodlines and breeding programs. Patricia Carmichael demonstrated a sharp understanding of territorial politics. Jennifer Sterling charmed everyone with stories of San Francisco society. Any one of them would make an acceptable wife. That was the problem. They were all acceptable, suitable, appropriate, and none of them made his heart race the way it had during one stolen kiss by the corral. When the evening finally ended and the guests retired to their rooms, Thomas found his father in the study, pouring himself a final brandy. Well? Marcus asked without preamble. They're all quite accomplished. That's not what I asked. Thomas slumped into a chair. What do you want me to say? That I've fallen instantly in love with one of them? That I'm ready to propose tomorrow? I want you to say you understand what's at stake. Marcus studied him over the rim of his glass. The Whitman girl would be my choice. Her family's land would double our water access. I thought this was my choice, within reason. Marcus set down his glass. Stay away from the stable tonight. Thomas's head snapped up. What? You heard me. Whatever fool thing you're thinking, forget it. I've invested too much in this ranch to watch you throw it away for a moment's passion. You don't know. I know everything that happens on my land. Marcus's eyes were cold as winter stone. That girl will be gone after the wedding, for her sake and yours. Until then, you'll keep your distance. Understood. The threat hung between them, naked and implacable. Thomas stood slowly, feeling older than his 28 years. Understood, he said, the word tasting like ashes. As he climbed the stairs to his room, he could hear the soft voices of the guests, the creak of floorboards as they settled for the night. Tomorrow would bring riding parties and picnics, more chances to court and be courted. But tonight, he stood at his window looking out toward the stables, where somewhere in the darkness, a woman walked a colicking mare and nursed a broken dream. And he wondered if his mother had stood at this same window once, accepting the cage that would become her life, learning to love the bars that held her. The morning ride had been Sarah Whitman's idea, and Thomas found himself leading a party of guests across the rolling grasslands as the sun climbed toward noon. Sarah rode beside him on a spirited sorrel mare, handling the animal with genuine skill. Behind them, Margaret Prescott clung to her side saddle, looking beautiful but uncomfortable, while Elizabeth Harrison had chosen to remain at the house with the older ladies. Patricia Carmichael rode with determination rather than grace, and Jennifer Sterling had surprised everyone by proving herself a competent horsewoman despite her city upbringing. The fathers had remained behind to talk business with Marcus, leaving the young people to their chaperoned excursion. Your land is magnificent, Sarah said, her face flushed with exertion and pleasure. I can see why your father guards it so fiercely. It has a way of getting into your blood, Thomas replied, guiding his mount around a prairie dog hole. My grandfather used to say the land owned us more than we owned it. A romantic notion, Patricia observed from behind, though I suspect the bank would disagree about ownership. They crested a rise, and the valley spread before them, endless grass rippling like a golden sea, the mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. The ladies reined in, momentarily silenced by the vista. It's rather overwhelming, Margaret murmured. So much space. Don't you feel lost in it? Never, Thomas said quietly. This is home. They were preparing to move on when riders appeared from the direction of the ranch. Thomas recognized Jake and several hands driving a small herd of horses toward the eastern pastures. With them, mounted on a raw-boned gray, was Clara. She rode like she was born to it, moving with the horse as if they were one creature. Her worn dress was practical for riding, her hair braided and pinned tight against the wind, even from a distance. Thomas could see her competence as she helped guide the herd, anticipating their movements, keeping the young ones from scattering. Who is that? Sarah asked, shading her eyes. She rides beautifully. One of the hands, Thomas said carefully. She works with the horses. A woman? Patricia's voice sharpened with interest. How unusual. The Double B employs whoever can do the job, Thomas replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. As the herd passed below them, Clara looked up. For an instant, their eyes met across the distance. Then she deliberately turned away, focusing on a yearling that had strayed from the group. But Margaret had noticed the exchange. She's rather pretty, isn't she? Margaret's tone was light, but her eyes were calculating. For a servant, I hadn't noticed. Thomas lied. Oh, come now, Patricia said with a knowing smile. A man would have to be blind not to notice, though I suppose fraternizing with the help would be quite the scandal. We should continue, Thomas said abruptly. There's a spring about a mile ahead where we can water the horses. As they rode on, he caught Sarah studying him with thoughtful eyes. Unlike the others, she said nothing, but her silence felt weighted with understanding. At the spring, they dismounted to rest. The ladies spread blankets in the shade of a cottonwood while Thomas tended the horses. He was checking Sarah's mount's hooves when she approached. She's the one, isn't she? Sarah said quietly. The stable girl, the reason you look like a man attending his own funeral. Thomas's hand stilled on the horse's leg. I don't know what you mean. Please don't insult my intelligence. I have eyes. She glanced at the others, who were engaged in conversation about fashion. I've seen how you watch the stables, how carefully you don't look at her when she's near. Miss Whitman. Sarah, please. She sighed. May I be frank with you, Mr. Brennan? I have a feeling you will be regardless. That earned him a small smile. I don't want to marry you. No offense intended. You seem a decent man, but I don't want to marry anyone. I want to run my family's ranch, to make the decisions, to build something with my own hands. Marriage would end that dream. Thomas studied her, seeing for the first time past the suitable facade to the person beneath. Then why are you here? The same reason you're courting us. Family pressure, duty, the endless weight of expectation. She picked up a pebble, rolling it between her fingers. My father needs this alliance. Your father needs our water rights. Simple mathematics. And what we need doesn't factor into the equation. When has it ever? She tossed the pebble into the spring. At least you're a man. You have options, limited though they seem. I'm a woman with opinions and ambitions in a world that values neither. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the water ripple. She loves you, Sarah said eventually. The stable girl. It's in how carefully she doesn't look at you. It doesn't matter. Doesn't it? Sarah turned to face him. Thomas, may I call you Thomas? We could make a bargain. You and I, What kind of bargain? A practical one. We marry, satisfying our families. I gain the freedom that comes with being a respectable married woman. You gain our water rights and my family's connections. And we both understand that it's business, not romance. A marriage of convenience. An honest marriage. No pretenses, no false expectations. She paused. And no questions asked about where your heart truly lies, as long as discretion is maintained. Thomas felt something twist in his chest. That's a cold future you're offering. It's a realistic one, better than Margaret's calculated charm or Patricia's political ambitions. At least with me. You'd know where you stand. And love? Love is a luxury people like us can't afford. But her voice was gentle. Though perhaps there are different kinds of love. The love of land, of purpose, of freedom to be who we truly are. A shout from the other ladies ended their conversation. It was time to return for the midday meal. As they rode back, Thomas found himself watching Sarah with new respect. She was right. It was a cold bargain she offered. But wasn't it better than pretense? The afternoon brought a picnic by the river, an elaborate affair with tables and chairs carried out by servants. Thomas made dutiful conversation with each lady in turn, played croquet on the uneven ground, and endured Jennifer Sterling's attempts at flirtation. Through it all, he was aware of the ranch continuing its rhythm around them. Cowboys moving cattle, horses being worked, the endless cycle of labor that kept the Double B alive. Once, he spotted Clara in the distance, helping repair a fence line, and had to force himself to look away before anyone noticed. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Margaret Prescott maneuvered him into a walk along the riverbank. She was beautiful in the dying light, her golden hair catching fire from the sunset. "Your father speaks highly of your business acumen," she said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "He says you'll double the ranch's holdings within 10 years. My father is optimistic, and you're not. I think the land has its own plans, and we're just along for the ride." She laughed, a practiced sound. "How poetic, though poetry doesn't pay the bills, does it?" "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. I could help with that," she said, moving closer. "Father's banking connections, my head for figures. We'd make quite a team. Thomas, may I call you Thomas?" "Of course. And you must call me Margaret." She smiled up at him. "I know this is awkward, this formal courtship, but I want you to know, I find you quite agreeable. I think we could build something wonderful together. Miss Prescott, Margaret, I appreciate your candor. But," she tilted her head, "there is a but coming, isn't it? This is all very new. We've known each other less than 2 days. Some things don't require time." She squeezed his arm gently. "Though I understand the need for proper consideration, just don't take too long. A girl does have her pride." They returned to find the party breaking up, the other guests retiring to prepare for dinner. Thomas escaped to his room, claiming the need to review ranch accounts, but once there, he stood at the window, watching the stable hands bring in the horses for the night. Clara was among them, moving with the easy efficiency of long practice. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up at his window. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the distance. Then she shook her head slightly, a tiny gesture that might have been regret or warning or farewell, and disappeared into the stable. Dinner that night was an elaborate affair. Marcus had spared no expense, and the ladies glittered in their evening wear. Thomas, trapped between Patricia Carmichael and Jennifer Sterling, played his part perfectly. He complimented, he charmed, he discussed the future of the territory with their fathers. But when Patricia mentioned her love of music and culture, he thought of Clara humming to the horses. When Jennifer described the shops of San Francisco, he remembered Clara's patched dress and work-worn hands. When Margaret laughed at something his father said, he heard Clara's rare, genuine laughter echoing from his memory. "You're very quiet tonight," Patricia observed as dessert was served. "Overwhelmed by so much feminine attention?" "Perhaps," he admitted. "I'm more comfortable with horses than dinner parties." How refreshingly honest. Though you'll need to overcome that if you marry into society." She lowered her voice. "A word of advice. Margaret's beautiful, but she's also calculating. Sarah's practical to a fault. Jennifer's sweet but weak. Elizabeth." She glanced at the quiet Harrison girl. "Elizabeth would bore you within a month." "And you?" "Me?" Patricia smiled. "I'm ambitious. I don't apologize for it. Marry me, and you'll have a senator's ear, and eventually, perhaps, a senator's influence. Your children would have opportunities beyond this ranch. And love is a chemical reaction that fades with time. Power, Mr. Brennan, endures." After dinner, there was dancing in the parlor. Thomas did his duty, partnering each lady in turn. But as he moved through the steps of a waltz with Margaret, he found himself thinking of another dance, one that existed only in imagination, where a stable girl in a patched dress smiled up at him without shadows in her eyes. "You're somewhere else entirely," Margaret murmured as the music ended. "My apologies. The concerns of the ranch." "Of course," but her smile had cooled slightly. "Just remember, Thomas, we're all performing here. The question is whether we can make the performance into something real." As the evening wound down, Thomas escaped to the porch, needing air. He found Sarah there, wrapped in a shawl against the night's chill. "Rethinking my offer?" she asked lightly. "Thinking about cages." He replied, "How we build them for ourselves and call them necessary. Sometimes they are necessary." She pulled the shawl tighter. "The trick is choosing the cage that gives you the most room to breathe." In the distance, a light burned in the stable window. Thomas wondered if Clara was there, tending some sick animal, finding solace in work as she always did. He wondered if she was thinking of him, or if she'd already begun the process of forgetting. "Choose soon," Sarah said softly. "The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes for everyone." She was right, he knew. Each day of this charade was another small cruelty, another twist of the knife. He needed to choose, not just a bride, but a future. And with that choice, he would either save the Double B or lose everything his family had built. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming rain. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, and Thomas felt an answering wildness in his chest, the urge to run, to break free, to choose love over land. But he was Marcus Brennan's son, heir to the Double B, and duty was the chain that bound him. Tomorrow, he would smile and court and choose among the suitable options presented to him. Tonight, though, he stood in the darkness and let himself imagine a different world, one where a stable girl could dance in a parlor, where love mattered more than alliances, where the heart could choose its own path across the endless grass. A foolish dream, but for a few more hours, it was his to cherish in the silence between duty and dawn. The letter arrived with the morning mail, delivered by a dusty rider who'd come from Cheyenne. Thomas was in the study reviewing breeding records when Jake brought it in, his weathered face carefully neutral. "Marked urgent," Jake said, setting the envelope on the desk. "From the railroad office?" Thomas's pulse quickened as he broke the seal. He'd sent discreet inquiries weeks ago, before his father's ultimatum, exploring options he'd barely dared consider. Now, scanning the contents, he felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. The Union Pacific was planning a spur line through the valley, and they needed right-of-way through the southeastern section of the Double B, rough land, mostly used for winter grazing, but strategically located. The price they offered was substantial, enough to secure the ranch's finances for years without need for matrimonial alliances. "Good news?" Jake asked, reading Thomas's expression. "Maybe." Thomas folded the letter carefully. "Jake, I need you to do something for me. Quietly." The older man's eyes sharpened. "I'm listening." "Ride to Cheyenne. Verify this offer is real. Talk to Sam Morrison at the land office. He'll know if the railroad's serious. But Jake, not a word to my father." Jake studied him for a long moment. "Playing a dangerous game, boy. I'm trying to find another way. For the ranch, or for yourself? Thomas met his gaze steadily. Both. Jake nodded slowly. I'll leave within the hour. Should be back by tomorrow night. After Jake left, Thomas tried to focus on routine tasks, but his mind kept returning to the letter. If the deal was legitimate, if he could present it to his father as a completed negotiation, it might be enough. Marcus Brennan respected strength and smart business above all. Surely he'd see the wisdom in choosing financial security over social alliances. The sound of horses drew him to the window. The ladies were preparing for their morning ride, and he was expected to join them. But as he watched the grooms bring out the mounts, he noticed Clara among them, checking saddles and adjusting stirrups. She moved with her usual quiet efficiency, but there was a tension in her shoulders he recognized. Margaret Prescott said something to her, too low for Thomas to hear, and Clara's face went carefully blank. She curtsied, a gesture that looked unnatural on her, and stepped back as Margaret mounted with assistance from a groom. Thomas's jaw clenched. He grabbed his hat and strode out, arriving at the mounting block just as Patricia Carmichael was commenting on the quaint nature of frontier servants. "Ladies," he said, forcing warmth into his voice. "Ready for today's adventure?" "Oh, yes," Jennifer Sterling gushed. "Sarah suggested we ride to Eagle's Bluff. She says the view is spectacular." "It is," Thomas confirmed, swinging into his saddle. As the party formed up, he caught Clara's eye. "Miss Morrison, we'll need the canteens filled. It's a long ride." "Yes, sir." Her voice was perfectly proper, but he saw the flash of something, hurt, anger, before she turned away. The ride to Eagle's Bluff took 2 hours through increasingly rough terrain. Sarah, as usual, proved the most competent horsewoman, while Margaret required constant attention on the steeper sections. Thomas found himself grateful for the distraction of managing the group, keeping his mind from dwelling on possibilities. At the bluff, they dismounted to admire the view, the entire valley spread below, the Double B's vast holdings visible for miles. Sarah stood beside him as the others exclaimed over the scenery. "You seem different today," she observed quietly. "More hopeful?" Thomas glanced at her, surprised by her perception. "Perhaps." "Good. Hope makes choosing easier." She paused. "I had a telegram yesterday. My father's arthritis is worsening. He needs my decision soon, so he can make arrangements." "Sarah, I know you don't love me," she continued calmly, "but I believe we could work well together. I wouldn't interfere with your other interests, as long as you afforded me the same courtesy." Before Thomas could respond, a commotion arose behind them. Margaret's horse had spooked at something, nearly throwing her. In the confusion of catching the animal and calming the rider, his conversation with Sarah was forgotten. They returned to the ranch by mid-afternoon, dusty and tired. Thomas helped the ladies dismount, then lingered as the grooms took the horses. Clara wasn't among them, unusual for this time of day. He found her in the feed room, mixing a mash for one of the older horses. She didn't look up when he entered. "Clara, you shouldn't be here." Her voice was flat. "Your guests will wonder. Let them wonder." "Easy for you to say." She stirred the mash with unnecessary force. "You're not the one they look at like something scraped off their boots." "What did Margaret say to you?" Clara's hand stilled. "Nothing that wasn't true. I know my place. Mr. Brennan. She just reminded me of it." "Clara, look at me." She turned reluctantly, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of maintaining her composure under constant small humiliations. "There might be another way," he said urgently. "The railroad. They want to buy passage rights. The money would be enough to—" "To what?" she interrupted. "To make your father accept a nobody for a daughter-in-law? To make society welcome a stable girl at their teas?" She shook her head. "You're dreaming. I'm trying to find a solution. The solution is for you to choose one of those perfectly suitable girls and live the life you were born to." She returned to her work. "And for me to be grateful for employment and shelter. You're giving up. I'm being realistic." She hefted the bucket of mash, Now, if you'll excuse me, Brandy is waiting for his supper." That evening, Thomas approached his father in the study. Marcus was reviewing ledgers, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. "The week is nearly up," Marcus said without preamble.
Have you made your choice?
"I'm considering all options." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Options? There are 5 options, all currently residing under my roof at considerable expense. Choose one." "What if there was another way to secure the ranch's future?" "Such as?" Thomas hesitated. Without confirmation from Jake, revealing the railroad deal was risky. "I'm exploring some possibilities." "Exploring?" Marcus set down his pen deliberately. "While you explore. 5 families are watching, waiting, judging. Every day you delay is an insult to their dignity and our reputation. I need more time." "You've had years." Marcus stood, moving to the window. "Do you think I don't know why you're stalling? That stable girl, her name is Clara. I don't care if her name is Queen Victoria, she's not suitable." "By whose standards?" "By any standard that matters." Marcus turned. His face flushed. "What can she offer besides a pretty face? No dowry, no connections, no family name. Marriage to her would be social and financial suicide." "If I could solve the financial concerns." "How? With wishes and dreams?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think love conquers all? Love doesn't pay for cattle feed. It doesn't buy water rights or influence railroad routes." "The railroad?" Thomas caught himself. Marcus's eyes sharpened. "What about the railroad?" "Nothing. Just thinking about the future. Think about this future. Choose a bride by tomorrow night, or start packing." Marcus returned to his desk. "I've been patient. Thomas, but patience has limits." Thomas left the study feeling the walls closing in. He walked aimlessly, finding himself at his mother's grave as full dark settled over the ranch. The headstone was a pale shadow in the moonlight. "What would you tell me, Mother?" he asked the silence. "Would you say duty comes first? Or would you tell me to fight for love?" The wind whispered through the grass, offering no answers. But as he stood there, Thomas made his decision. Tomorrow, Jake would return with information about the railroad deal. If it was solid, he'd present it to his father as a done deal, a solution that required no matrimonial sacrifice. And if Marcus still insisted on a society marriage, then Thomas would have to choose between love and legacy, between Clara and the Double B. He made his way back to the house, avoiding the parlor where he could hear the ladies singing around the piano. In his room, he drafted a telegram to the railroad office, pressing for quick action. Then he wrote another letter, this one to a lawyer in Cheyenne he'd met once, inquiring about the legal requirements for land sales. As midnight approached, he stood at his window looking out toward the stables. A figure moved in the shadows. Clara, making her final rounds. Always dedicated, always working, asking for nothing but the right to earn her keep. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow would bring Jake's news. And with it, either hope or heartbreak. But either way, the waiting would end. He'd played the dutiful son long enough. Smiled and danced and courted while his heart pulled him elsewhere. One way or another, tomorrow he would choose his future. And Clara's too, though she didn't know it yet. The candle burned low as Thomas finally sought his bed. But sleep was elusive. Somewhere in the darkness, a night bird called. Its cry both mournful and defiant. He knew how it felt, caught between earth and sky. Yearning for flight but tethered to the ground. Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow. The letter hidden in his jacket pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. But it also felt like freedom. If the railroad deal was real, if the money was enough, if his father could see past tradition to opportunity. Too many ifs, but it was all he had. Hope as fragile as prairie flowers, and just as determined to bloom despite the harsh soil that birthed it. The afternoon sun slanted through the study windows as Thomas stood before his father's desk, the railroad contract heavy in his hands. Jake had returned at dawn with confirmation. The deal was not only real but better than the initial offer. The Union Pacific needed the route urgently, and was willing to pay premium prices. Marcus Brennan sat behind his desk like a judge, his weathered face unreadable. Between them lay the morning's drama. Thomas had announced at breakfast that he'd made his decision, asking all parties to gather in the study at 3 o'clock. The 5 families now waited in the parlor, tension thick as summer dust. "Well," Marcus said finally, "which girl have you chosen?" "None of them." Thomas set the contract on the desk. "I've chosen a different path." Marcus's face darkened. "I gave you clear instructions. Read it." Thomas interrupted. "Before you say anything else, read what I've brought you." Marcus's jaw clenched at the interruption, but he picked up the papers. Thomas watched his father's eyes move across the pages, saw the moment when understanding dawned. The railroad was offering enough money to secure the Double B for a generation. "How long have you been negotiating this?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. 3 weeks. I sent initial inquiries before you issued your ultimatum. Behind my back. I was exploring options, trying to find a way to strengthen the ranch that didn't involve—" Thomas paused, choosing his words carefully. "That didn't require sacrificing personal choice for financial security." Marcus set down the contract. "The land they want. It's our winter grazing. Eastern section only. We can relocate the herd to the northern pastures. Jake's already confirmed it's workable." "Jake knew about this?" "I asked him to verify the offer. He's loyal to the Double B above all. You know that." Marcus stood slowly, moving to the window. "You think you're clever, solving all our problems with a pen stroke. I think I'm practical. You taught me that, to see opportunities, to act on them. I also taught you about duty, about family obligations. My duty is to preserve and grow the Double B. This contract does that." Thomas took a breath. "Father, we don't need marriage alliances, not with this deal. And what about social standing, political connections? The things money can't buy. We'll build them over time, on our own terms." Marcus turned from the window. "This is about that girl. This is about the ranch. Don't lie to me, boy. You'd marry one of those perfectly suitable women without complaint if that stable girl didn't exist." Thomas met his father's glare steadily. "Perhaps, but she does exist, and I won't pretend otherwise. So you'd throw away everything for—" "I'm not throwing away anything." Thomas's control finally cracked. "I'm bringing you a fortune. I'm securing our future without selling myself to the highest bidder. You're a fool. That girl has a name. Clara Morrison. And yes, I love her." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. "But even if she didn't exist, this would still be the smart choice. The railroad money gives us freedom. Father, freedom to choose our own paths." A knock interrupted them. Jake entered, his face carefully neutral. "Pardon the intrusion, but the families are getting restless. They're asking—" "Send them in," Marcus said abruptly. "All of them. And—" He paused, something shifting in his expression. "Ask Miss Morrison to join us." Thomas's heart lurched. "Father? If we're going to have this out, let's have it fully—" "Jake, fetch the girl." Jake glanced at Thomas, then nodded and left. Within minutes, the study filled with people, 5 young women in their finest dresses, their parents radiating varying degrees of confusion and indignation. Clara entered last, still in her work clothes, hay dust in her hair. She looked bewildered and wary, her eyes seeking Thomas's. Marcus stood behind his desk like a general addressing troops. "I apologize for the drama, but it seems my son has something to announce." "Father, no, you wanted to choose your own path. Choose it, publicly. Let everyone understand exactly what's happening here." Thomas felt all eyes on him. Margaret Prescott's were cold with dawning understanding. Sarah Whitman watched with something like sympathy. Clara stood frozen near the door, as if ready to flee. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas began, his voice steadier than his nerves. "I'm deeply grateful for your visit and the honor you've shown our family. Any man would be fortunate to marry any of your daughters." "But," Patricia Carmichael's voice was sharp. "But I cannot offer what I don't possess. My heart." He looked directly at Clara. "My heart has already been given." The room erupted. "Mrs." Sterling gasped. "Mr." Prescott's face went purple. Margaret laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. "Are you saying, Mrs.?" Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. "That you've brought us here, allowed us to parade our daughters like cattle, when you were already attached?" "No, ma'am, I fought against it, tried to do what was expected." Thomas moved to the desk, picking up the railroad contract. "But I also found another way to secure the ranch's future, one that doesn't require a marriage of convenience." He explained the deal quickly, watching comprehension dawn on the businessmen's faces. William Prescott was the first to speak. "That's actually quite clever. The railroad money would indeed secure your position." "Clever?" His wife's voice was shrill. "Our daughter has been humiliated." "I meant no humiliation." Thomas said, "Only honesty." "Honesty?" Margaret stepped forward, her beautiful face twisted with fury. "Shall we discuss honesty? How about the honest fact that you've been meeting with that," she pointed at Clara, "that creature while pretending to court us?" "Be careful how you speak," Thomas warned, moving instinctively toward Clara. "Or what? You'll defend your stable girl's honor?" Margaret's laugh was ugly. "She has no honor. She's nothing. A nobody who somehow bewitched you into throwing away everything. That's enough." Clara's voice was quiet but firm. She stepped forward, her chin high despite the hostile stares. "Miss Prescott is right. I am nobody. I have no family, no fortune, no connections. What I do have is 6 years of honest work on this ranch. I've asked for nothing beyond my wages and a place to sleep." "Clara, you don't have to—" Thomas started. "Yes, I do." She faced Marcus. "Mr. Brennan, you gave me a chance when no one else would. I've tried to repay that by being the best worker I could be. I never encouraged your son's attention. I knew my place." "Your place?" Patricia Carmichael interjected. "Your place is wherever she chooses it to be." Thomas interrupted firmly. He moved to stand beside Clara. "I love this woman, not for what she can bring to a marriage contract, but for who she is, her strength, her kindness, her dedication." "Pretty words," Marcus said coldly. "But the world runs on more than pretty words, which is why I brought you the railroad contract. Father, we can have both, financial security and the freedom to choose love over obligation." "Love?" Marcus spoke the word like a curse. "Your mother and I learned to love each other? Yes, you've told me. But what if you hadn't? What if you'd spent 40 years bound to someone you couldn't even like, much less love? We'd have survived. Done our duty." "Survived isn't lived." Thomas's voice rang off the walls. "I won't do it. I won't marry for land or money or connections. Not when there's another way." Sarah Whitman suddenly spoke. "He's right." Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood serene amidst the chaos, a small smile on her face. "The railroad deal is solid. I know, my family has investments with Union Pacific. Mr. Brennan doesn't need a marriage alliance if he has that contract." She looked at Thomas. "I withdraw my interest. Frankly, I'm relieved." "Sarah!" Her mother looked appalled. "Oh, Mother, stop. We all know this was a business arrangement. At least Mr. Brennan has the courage to admit it." She moved toward the door, pausing beside Clara. "You're fortunate, Miss Morrison. Not many men would risk so much for love." Her withdrawal broke the dam. Within minutes, the other families were making stiff farewells, dignity wrapped around them like armor. Only Margaret lingered, her perfect features marred by spite. "You'll regret this," she told Thomas, "when society shuns you, when your children are outcasts. Remember you chose this." "I'll remember," Thomas said quietly. "Every day, with gratitude." When the last carriage rolled away, only Thomas, Clara, Marcus, and Jake remained in the study. The silence stretched taut as wire. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Jake, you may go." "Sir." Jake tipped his hat to Clara as he left, a gesture of respect that made her eyes widen. Marcus studied the railroad contract again. This deal, it's ironclad? Yes, sir, I had lawyers review it. Behind my back, to protect the ranch, just as you taught me. Marcus's laugh was short and bitter. Thrown my own lessons back at me. He looked at Clara. You understand what you're costing him? Social standing, political connections, easier paths to power. I've told him to choose duty, Clara said steadily. Multiple times. Yet here he stands. Marcus moved closer to her. What makes you think you're worth such sacrifice? Clara lifted her chin. I don't think I'm worth it, but that's not my choice to make. It's his. And if I disown him, cast you both out with nothing, then we'll build our own life. Thomas said, I can work. So can Clara. We don't need— Oh, shut up. Marcus suddenly looked tired. You think I'd destroy everything I've built out of spite? He picked up the contract. This is good business. I hate how you did it, but it's good business. Hope flickered in Thomas's chest. Father? I'm not blessing this match. That girl, Clara, she's proven herself a good worker. But a daughter-in-law? He shook his head. Society will talk. Doors will close to us. Some doors, perhaps, but others might open. Clara understands this land, these animals, in ways those society women never could. Pretty words again. Truth, Clara said quietly. Mr. Brennan, I know what I am and what I'm not. I can't host a governor's dinner or charm senators, but I can help run this ranch. I can raise children who understand the value of hard work. I can stand beside your son through drought and plenty alike. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You've got spine, I'll give you that. He turned to Thomas. This is your choice? Final? It's been my choice for years. I was just too afraid to admit it. And now I'm more afraid of a life without her than any social consequences. Marcus signed the railroad contract with quick, sharp strokes. There, the ranch is secured. As for the rest, he looked between them. You'll marry quietly. No scandal, no fuss. The girl will learn what she needs to know about running a proper household. And if society shuns us, he shrugged, we'll survive. Brennans always do. It wasn't a blessing, but it was acceptance. Thomas reached for Clara's hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Thank you, Father. Don't thank me yet. This path you've chosen, it won't be easy. Love might be enough in fairy tales, but out here, Marcus gestured toward the window, toward the vast, unforgiving land. Out here, you'll need more than love. We'll have more, Clara said. We'll have partnership, trust, shared purpose. We'll see. Marcus moved to the door. I'll inform the staff of the change in circumstances. Try not to completely destroy our reputation before dinner. He left them alone in the study. For a moment, neither moved. Then Clara laughed, a shaky sound full of disbelief. Did that just happen? I think it did. Thomas pulled her close, feeling her tremble. Are you afraid? Terrified, she admitted. Those women were right. I don't know how to be a rancher's wife. You know how to be yourself. That's all I want. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw his future. Uncertain, challenging, but chosen freely. I love you, he said, the words simple and true. I love you too, she whispered. Enough to face whatever comes. Outside, the sun was setting over the Double B, painting the grasslands gold. It was the same view Thomas had known all his life, but somehow it looked different now, full of possibility rather than obligation, promise rather than prison. They stood together at the window, watching the light fade, their hands entwined. Tomorrow would bring challenges, society's scorn, his father's continued disapproval, the long work of building a life together. But tonight, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, they had won the only victory that mattered. They had chosen love over duty, truth over convention, and in the vast, unforgiving landscape of the Wyoming Territory. That was no small triumph. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with a crispness in the air that spoke of autumn's approach. Thomas stood at his window, watching the sun paint the grasslands in shades of gold and amber. Below, the ranch was already stirring, cowboys heading out to check the herds, smoke rising from the cookhouse chimney, horses nickering in the corrals. It had been 2 months since the confrontation in the study. 2 months of adjustment, preparation, and slowly winning over the household staff. Mrs. Rodriguez, the head housekeeper, had been the hardest to convince, but Clara's willingness to learn, her lack of pretension, and her genuine desire to help had eventually worn down even that formidable woman's resistance. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Jake entered, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "This came from town," Jake said, setting it on the dresser. "From Judge Thornton." Thomas unwrapped it carefully, revealing a silver pocket watch with an inscription. "To mark new beginnings. With respect, Samuel Thornton." The judge sent a note too. Jake continued, producing an envelope. "Says he'll be proud to perform the ceremony." At least one prominent citizen hadn't turned his back on them. Judge Thornton had known Thomas since childhood, had seen the work Clara did at the ranch. His support meant more than Thomas could express. "How is she?" Thomas asked. Jake's weathered face cracked into a rare smile. "Nervous as a cat in a thunderstorm, but happy. Sarah Whitman arrived an hour ago to help her prepare." That had been an unexpected blessing. Sarah, true to her independent spirit, had maintained her friendship despite her family's disapproval. She'd even sent Clara a wedding gift, a beautiful riding habit made by Denver's finest seamstress. And my father? In his study. Been there since dawn. Jake paused. "He's struggling. Tom, but he's trying." Marcus had kept his word over the past weeks. He'd been distant but not cruel, watching Clara's efforts to learn household management with critical but not unkind eyes. Once, Thomas had even caught him showing her the account books, explaining the system his late wife had used. "Tell Clara I'll see her at the chapel," Thomas said. "Will do." Jake turned to leave, then paused. "Your mother would be proud. Both of you choosing love. Both of you willing to fight for it. That takes courage." After Jake left, Thomas dressed carefully in his best suit, not as fine as what he'd have worn to marry Margaret Prescott or one of the others, but honest and appropriate. As he adjusted his string tie, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. The railroad deal had been finalized within a week of that dramatic afternoon. The money now sat secure in the Cheyenne Bank, earning interest, providing a cushion against whatever storms might come. Several smaller ranchers had already approached them about breeding contracts for their horses, drawn by Clara's growing reputation as a trainer. Not everything had been smooth. Some society families had indeed closed their doors. The invitation to the Cattlemen's Association Gala had been pointedly withdrawn. Mrs. Sterling had crossed the street rather than acknowledge them in town, but others had surprised them. Doc Winters and his wife had paid a social call, bringing a wedding quilt made by the church ladies. Several ranch families had sent congratulations, respecting the courage it took to buck convention. And yesterday, a letter had arrived from an unexpected source, Catherine Thornton, the judge's daughter, newly returned from college back east. "Miss Morrison's story has inspired me," she'd written. "To see a woman rise by her own merit, to watch love triumph over convention, it gives me hope for my own unconventional dreams." Thomas made his way downstairs, finding the house transformed. Despite the modest nature of the wedding, Mrs. Rodriguez had insisted on doing things properly. Flowers from her own garden graced every surface, and the smell of baking filled the air. The wedding breakfast would be simple but abundant. This was still a working ranch. After all, he found his father on the porch, staring out at the land. "Second thoughts?" Marcus asked without turning. "No, sir, never." "Good." Marcus faced him. A man should be certain of his choices. He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. "This was your mother's, her wedding ring. I thought Clara should have it." Thomas opened the box. Throat tight. The ring was simple. A gold band with 3 small diamonds. "Father, She would have liked Clara," Marcus said gruffly. "Would have admired her backbone. Your mother came from privilege. But she learned to be a rancher's wife. Clara's doing it in reverse, coming from nothing, learning to manage abundance. In some ways, that's harder." "Thank you." Marcus nodded once. "The chapel's ready." Small crowd, mostly ranch folk and a few townspeople with sense. Nothing fancy. "We don't need fancy." "No," Marcus agreed. "You need sturdy. And from what I've seen," he almost smiled, "you might just have found it." The ride to the chapel was short. The small building sat on a rise overlooking the valley, its whitewashed walls bright in the morning sun. Wagons and horses already filled the yard, more than Thomas had expected. As he dismounted, he saw familiar faces: Jake and the senior hands, Doc Winters, Judge Thornton, several neighboring ranchers who defied social pressure to attend. Inside, the chapel was simple but beautiful. More of Mrs. Rodriguez's flowers lined the aisle, and sunlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in warm gold. Thomas took his place at the altar, Judge Thornton beside him, and waited. The door opened, and Sarah Whitman entered first, wearing a sage-green dress that complemented her practical beauty. She winked at Thomas as she took her place. Clara had asked her to stand as witness, and Sarah had accepted with genuine pleasure. Then Clara appeared, and Thomas forgot how to breathe. She wore a dress of cream-colored silk, not elaborate, but perfectly suited to her. Sarah had helped with her hair, arranging it in an elegant style that framed her face. But it was Clara's expression that caught him, joy mixed with determination, love tempered by awareness of what they were taking on. Marcus, in a gesture that surprised everyone, offered her his arm. He walked her down the aisle with grave dignity, placing her hand in Thomas's with a look that said more than words could. "Dearly beloved," Judge Thornton began, his voice filling the small space, "we gather today to witness something rare in this hard land. A love that has chosen its own path, despite all obstacles." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Thomas slipped his mother's ring onto Clara's finger, he saw tears in her eyes. When she spoke her vows, her voice was clear and strong, promising not just love but partnership, not just devotion but hard work. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Thornton declared. "Thomas, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was sweet and brief, mindful of their audience. But in it was a promise of all the kisses to come, all the mornings they'd wake together, all the evenings they'd watch the sun set over their land. Their land. The thought still seemed miraculous. As they turned to face the congregation, Thomas saw something that made his heart swell. The ranch hands were grinning broadly. Mrs. Rodriguez was dabbing at her eyes. Even Marcus looked, if not happy, then at least satisfied. But it was the unexpected guests who truly moved him. Sam Morrison from the land office, who'd helped with the railroad deal. The church ladies who'd defied gossip to support one of their own. Young Tommy Jenkins, the orphan boy Clara had been teaching to ride, beaming from his front row seat. They had lost some of the society's approval. Yes, but they had gained something more valuable. A community built on respect rather than mere social standing. The wedding breakfast was held at the ranch, tables set up under the cottonwoods. It was a far cry from the elaborate reception that would have followed a society wedding, but the laughter was genuine, the food abundant, and the goodwill sincere. Sarah cornered them as the sun reached its zenith. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she announced, "heading back to manage our ranch. Father's finally accepted that I won't marry just for alliance." "What will you do?" Clara asked. "Run cattle. Breed horses. Build something with my own hands." Sarah smiled. "You two gave me courage. If a stable girl can become a rancher's wife, then a woman can run her own spread." As the afternoon wore on, the guests gradually departed, leaving the newlyweds standing on the porch of what was now their shared home. The Double B stretched before them, unchanged yet somehow different. It was no longer Thomas's inheritance or Clara's place of employment. It was their future, their challenge, their opportunity. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked, pulling his wife close. Clara considered the question with her usual thoughtfulness. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "There's so much to learn, so much to prove. But yes, I'm happy, happier than I ever dreamed possible. No regrets? None." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "You gave up so much for this. For me, I gained more," Thomas said firmly. "I gained a partner who understands this land in her bones, a wife who knows the value of hard work, a woman who loves not for what she can get, but for who I am." Pretty words, Clara teased, echoing his father's frequent criticism. True words. They stood together as the sun began its descent, painting their world in shades of rose and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be those who'd test them, who'd wait for them to fail. The work of the ranch would continue its relentless pace. Clara would have to navigate the complex world of being Mrs. Thomas Brennan while staying true to herself. But tonight, on this porch, with the land spreading endlessly before them and the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, anything seemed possible. Marcus emerged from the house, a glass of whiskey in hand. He stood beside them for a moment, surveying his empire. "It's yours now," he said quietly. "Both are yours. The land, the cattle, the horses, the legacy. Guard it well." "We will," Thomas promised. "Together," Clara added. Marcus nodded once, then raised his glass. "To the Double B, to family, to choices made with open eyes." They didn't have glasses to raise in return, but the gesture was understood. As Marcus walked back inside, leaving them alone, Thomas thought about the journey that had brought them here, a letter demanding he choose a bride, 5 perfect candidates, one stable girl who'd captured his heart years before he'd admitted it. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked. "About cages," Thomas said. "How sometimes breaking free of one means choosing another, but if you choose the right one." "It's not a cage at all," Clara finished. "It's a home," as if in agreement. A horse whinnied from the stable. Clara's head turned automatically toward the sound, and Thomas laughed. "Go on," he said. "Check on them. I know you want to. On our wedding night? We have a lifetime of nights. The horses are family too." She kissed him then, thoroughly, and without the restraint they'd shown in the chapel. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I'll be quick," she promised. "I'll be waiting." As she walked toward the stable, her wedding dress catching the last light, Thomas felt a peace he'd never known before. They had chosen love over convention, partnership over profit, truth over tradition. The road ahead would be challenging, but they would walk it together. The Double B Ranch stood strong against the darkening sky, its future secure not just in land and cattle, but in the union of 2 hearts that had refused to be denied. And somewhere in the vast Wyoming night, the wind carried the sound of horses and hope, dreams and determination. Across the endless grass, a new chapter had begun. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please share in the comments below so we can connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts on Thomas and Clara's journey. Did love truly conquer all? Let us know what you think.